The storm rolled in like an argument from the heavens, thick with thunder that rattled windows and made sensible people latch their doors. But one man, an aging printer, with spectacles sliding down his nose, stepped out into the downpour carrying a kite, a length of hemp string, and a metal key. It looked less like a scientific experiment and more like a dare whispered to the sky. Witnesses later said that Benjamin Franklin didn't seem afraid. If anything, he looked curious, as if the clouds had been keeping secrets from him for far too long, and tonight he intended to pry them loose. Franklin had spent years stalking lightning, obsessed with the wild electric fire that split the sky each summer. While others prayed for storms to pass, he studied them. He watched church steeples explode when struck, heard stories of bells ringing from electrical charge alone, and collected testimonies from people who felt shocks when lightning hit the ground nearby. In those events, he noticed a pattern. Electricity, even in its most terrifying form, behaved as if it were obeying invisible rules. And Franklin, a man notorious for questioning everything from monarchy to modesty, wanted to know exactly what those rules were. Long before he stepped into that thunderstorm, he had already transformed Philadelphia's scientific scene. Franklin was the sort of thinker who could turn a simple curiosity into a world-changing revelation. He had invented the lightning rod, bifocals, and a stove that heated homes more efficiently than any of the clumsy contraptions of the time. He had even taught himself to swim in an age when most people avoided deep water altogether. But his greatest obsession, the one that would make him a legend, was electricity. Electricity in the 18th century was a parlor trick, a novelty. Wealthy households bought Leyden jars to shock their guests after dinner. Traveling lecturers set up exhibitions where people formed human chains just to feel the odd tingling sensations of static discharge. But for Franklin, electricity wasn't entertainment. He sensed that it was the key to understanding nature itself. He wrote to friends in Europe, describing experiments that left them astonished. Ribbons levitating, sparks dancing across metal rods, and jars storing what he called electrical fire, as if it were an actual fluid. And then came the idea, both elegant and audacious, that lightning was simply electricity writ large, a celestial version of the sparks he conjured in his workshop. Many scientists suspected it, but no one dared test it. Lightning was too dangerous to handle directly. Many who came close never lived to explain their methods. Yet Franklin believed he could find a way, not by touching lightning itself, but by drawing its presence safely into a controlled experiment. Originally, he imagined placing a tall iron rod atop a church steeple, with wires running into a protected enclosure where instruments could measure electric charge. But constructing such a device required more time and more permission than he had. Meanwhile, storms continued to crash over Philadelphia with reckless abandon. Franklin's frustration grew, so he turned to something older, simpler, and already built for catching wind: a kite. According to the most dramatic retellings, Franklin flew the kite alone, illuminated by a jagged bolt of lightning that crashed down inches from where he stood. But the truth, while slightly less explosive, is far more interesting. He did not fly the kite into a bolt. That would have killed him instantly. Instead, he raised it into a storm cloud, saturated with electrical charge. The wet hemp string acted like a conductor, pulling ambient electricity downward. It didn't take long before the fibers began to stand on end, humming faintly. Franklin could feel the air around him shift, the way it does before a strike. Then, something small but extraordinary happened. A single spark jumped from the metal key, affixed to the string. A crackle, then another. Proof that electricity was traveling from the cloud to his apparatus. Franklin was witnessing the very force of the storm, safe enough to observe, yet powerful enough to confirm a theory that could reshape physics. His son, William, who stood beside him, later wrote that his father's face lit up not from the spark, but from triumph. The sky had given him its secret. Yet, for all its brilliance, the experiment was not widely believed at first. European scholars demanded proof from their own soil. Many tried to recreate the experiment, and most failed, some disastrously. In France, a Swedish scientist named Georg Wilhelm Richmann attempted a similar test with a metal rod extending into a storm. The rod attracted a full lightning strike, killing him instantly. His death became a grim warning, but it also validated Franklin's premise. Lightning was undeniably electrical. Once the world accepted the discovery, Franklin's lightning rod became an international sensation. It was elegant in concept, an iron spike mounted atop a building, connected to a metal cable that ran safely to the ground. When lightning sought the easiest path, it followed the rod and discharged harmlessly into the earth, instead of setting roofs ablaze. Churches, homes, ships, and government buildings soon adopted Franklin's invention. Fires dropped dramatically. Whole towns were spared destruction. But introducing the lightning rod also ignited controversy. Some theologians protested, claiming Franklin was interfering with divine judgment. Lightning, they argued, was a tool of God, and to redirect it was to meddle in heavenly affairs. Franklin found this amusing. He quipped that if God wanted to kill people with lightning, perhaps churches shouldn't be the buildings most frequently struck. His humor, as usual, won more allies than it lost. What makes Franklin's achievement even more astonishing is how close he came to losing his life during the experiment. Although he avoided a direct strike, the electrical charge he handled was still dangerous. A stronger surge, a moment of misplaced contact, or even a slightly different wind pattern could have ended the story in that storm-soaked field. He later wrote in a letter, with typical understatement, that the experiment should not be tried in such a manner as to be in the least dangerous. Coming from him, that was practically an admission of suicide-level risk. Despite the danger, the moment Franklin drew electricity from the sky elevated him to global fame. In Europe, he was celebrated as a scientific hero. In America, he became an icon of ingenuity, proof that curiosity could unlock the very laws of nature. Even kings sought his advice, though he wore simple clothes and preferred conversation with common people. In Paris, aristocrats flooded his residence, hoping to hear firsthand the story of the storm, the kite, and the spark that changed science forever. Yet, for all the drama surrounding the experiment, Franklin never seemed interested in taking personal glory. What mattered to him was the idea, the pursuit of truth. He often said he wanted to make life a little more convenient, and if saving a few thousand wooden buildings from fiery destruction counted, then he had certainly done that. But the deeper legacy lay in the shift he created. Electricity went from a curiosity to a field of inquiry. From Franklin's spark would come decades of discoveries: batteries, generators, motors, telegraphs, and ultimately the electrified world we live in today. In old age, Franklin reflected on his life with the same wit he had applied to everything. Asked once what he considered his greatest accomplishment, he didn't name diplomacy or the Declaration of Independence or the invention that made him a celebrity. Instead, he smiled and said he hoped people might remember him kindly. It was a humble wish from a man who once reached up and touched the storm. The story of Franklin's kite experiment endures because it captures something rare: a human being, standing beneath a threatening sky, determined to understand rather than fear it. A person willing to risk danger, not for glory or wealth, but for knowledge itself. And if there is anything truly electrifying about Benjamin Franklin, it isn't that he drew power from the clouds. It's that he taught the world to look upward, to question boldly, and to ask the sky what secrets it still holds.